It was supposed to be a simple flight, an exciting weekend getaway to New York for a family reunion. Maya and I had been looking forward to it for months. We'd been counting down the days. We were packed, we were ready, and it was supposed to be smooth sailing. That is, until we reached the gate. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. I remember the morning like it was yesterday. The sun was barely up, and we were hustling through the airport, trying to make our flight on time. Our bags were packed with clothes for the weekend, but we were also packed with excitement. Our dad had arranged everything: the flights, the hotel, even the dinner reservations. All we had to do was show up and board. It was supposed to be easy that we got to the check-in counter. Maya went first. She breezed through, no problem. She's always been the more laid-back twin. Me? I'm the cautious one. I tend to double-check everything, so when it was my turn to hand over my boarding pass, I smiled and hoped everything went smoothly. The attendant behind the desk, a woman in her early 30s with short dark hair and a stiff smile, took my ID and scanned my boarding pass. She froze that IT first. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the system was down, or maybe she was just taking longer than usual. But the way she looked at me, the way she looked at my ID, it felt like something was off. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice light. I didn't want to cause a scene, but something about her icy stare made me nervous. She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she tapped her screen a few times, then scanned me again with that same look. The silence between us grew heavy. I tried to keep my composure, but the longer she stared at me, the more I felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong. Please step aside, she finally said, her tone clipped. There's an issue with your ticket. We need to run a secondary check. I glanced over at Maya, who was already halfway through the gate, completely unaware of what was happening. I quickly walked over to the side, trying to remain calm. What could possibly be wrong? It was just a regular flight, nothing out of the ordinary. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized something wasn't right. I could hear the attendant whispering to another worker, and although I couldn't hear the exact words, I could catch bits and pieces. Flagged. Secondary screening. We need approval. I began to feel my chest tighten. A few minutes passed. Then a second attendant approached, a man this time. He didn't even look at me. He just walked right past me and spoke to the woman behind the counter. Their conversation was low, almost a whisper, but I could still catch the words suspicious and incomplete data. I tried to stay composed, but I could feel my patience running thin. What's going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why am I being flagged? I haven't done anything wrong. The second attendant looked me over but didn't respond. Instead, he turned to the woman and gave her a signal to escort me to a nearby corner that I was now standing in an isolated space, away from the crowd, under the harsh fluorescent lights. And a sense of dread washed over me. My mind raced with thoughts of what was happening. Was this some sort of random check? Or was there something more sinister at play? As I stood there, trying to make sense of everything, I noticed the eyes of the other passengers flicking toward me, some of them whispering, some just staring. It was as if everyone knew something I didn't, and that made me feel even more isolated. The minutes dragged on. Maya was still at the gate, completely unaware that I hadn't made it through yet. I tried to call her, but my phone was dying, and there was no charger in sight. I felt stuck. After what felt like an eternity, a supervisor came over. She was a middle-aged woman, stern-faced, with a no-nonsense attitude that seemed to radiate power. She didn't introduce herself. She just looked at me, then turned to the attendants. Is there an issue? She asked. Yes, ma'am, the woman behind the counter said. This passenger's boarding has been flagged for secondary screening. We're waiting on further instructions. The supervisor turned back to me, her gaze cold. We can't let you board today, she said bluntly. There's an issue with your ticket. You'll need to be rescheduled on a later flight. My heart sank. What do you mean, issue with my ticket? What's going on? I need to board this flight. She didn't even look at me as she turned away. Please wait here. We'll handle it in a moment, she said, walking off. I stood there in disbelief. Denied boarding? Over what? I couldn't figure it out. I wasn't late. My ticket was legitimate. Everything had been arranged through Dad's company, and we'd flown with this airline before without any issues. Maya was already standing at the gate, waiting to board. She looked around, clearly wondering where I was. She waved at me, but I just stood there, frozen, my eyes locked on the attendants, who were now exchanging looks as if they were deciding what to do next, and I was about to lose it. I had never felt so out of place in my entire life. Not just because of the way I was being treated, but because deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something wasn't adding up, and I could feel it in my bones. The anxiety in my chest was now a full-on panic. I'm sorry, the supervisor returned, her voice now more curt than ever. You will need to reschedule. I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere until someone explains what's going on. I crossed my arms, standing my ground. Without missing a beat, Maya grabbed her phone and dialed our dad. I watched her face shift from confusion to frustration as she spoke with him. Dad, we're stuck, she said, her voice tight. They won't let Brienne aboard, and they won't tell us why. They keep saying there's an issue with her ticket, but it makes no sense. We all knew what was coming. Dad was a high-level executive at a major corporation. He was no stranger to dealing with big companies, and when he was involved, things moved quickly. Maya hung up, and within seconds, we were surrounded by airline executives, several of them, all looking uncomfortable. One of them held out his hand. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, he said, but his voice lacked sincerity. There's been a mix-up with the system. A mix-up? Maya asked, eyebrow raised. You think my sister should be stranded here for no reason? Just because of a mix-up? I didn't even have to say anything. The look Maya shot them spoke volumes. I'm calling my dad right now, she said, dialing again. He's the CEO of a major company, and I'm sure he'll love to hear about how you've treated his daughters today. The minute she mentioned Dad's position, everything changed. The temperature in the room shifted. The tension was palpable. The executives began to talk among themselves in hushed tones, and the one who had previously been the most dismissive suddenly looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Within minutes, Maya and I were walking through the gate, no questions asked. The flight had been delayed just long enough for us to board. The airline had learned exactly who they were dealing with, and they weren't about to let their mistake blow up into something worse. That we sat down, the weight of the entire experience still hanging over us. And as the plane took off, I couldn't help but think about everything that had just happened. It wasn't just about the flight. It wasn't just about the frustration. It was about the realization that, as a Black woman, my presence, my identity, had been the reason for that delay. It was about the fact that, in 2025, I was still being judged based on my skin color. And it was about the fact that, at the end of the day, a single phone call from my dad had shifted everything. It shouldn't have taken that phone call, but it did. And that, in itself, was a lesson. A lesson in the ugly reality of systemic racism. A lesson that reminded me how fragile things could be. How a small moment, like being denied boarding on a plane, could make you realize just how far we still have to go. But in that moment, with Maya sitting beside me and the plane soaring above the clouds, I knew we had won, if only for today. We had fought back. We had stood up for ourselves. And that, no matter what, was the only victory that mattered. Even if it had taken a CEO's phone call to get there.